This drawing is called Daemon, D-A-E-M-O-N, and it was begun a few years ago, but I finished it this year, and then I put it into a large diptych in the gallery. Oh my God, we're locked down. Daemon is the name of the character who returns your emails if there's a mistake.
Mailer Daemon.
Yeah. Drawing from the window again, but enlarged. And the other panel of the diptych was done a few years ago also. It was a horizontal with kind of the same idea, using a lot of lines, linear elements to create a space. And in this one, I created a very shallow space. It's rather claustrophobic if you consider this to be a figure. He's really pressed tightly into that little space. In the other one, I used the linear elements and the weaving of the lines to make a wide open space. And I have intended that as you look into the lower half of the painting, it seems as though you're looking down into a landscape from a great distance. And the upper half of the painting, you're looking up into the sky with many lines crossing. The title of this diptych is "The Internet is the Devil." It seemed to fit, but it doesn't have a heavy theological meaning to it. I have a wall here of paintings that were inspired by the shapes of bones. This particular little painting came from a pile of elk bones that we found when we were hiking in the Coast Range in the mountains, and in the forest the bones were kind of laid out and created quite a pattern against the mosses and the other colors of the forest. So I just took the idea of the bones kind of echoing around into the forest. It is called Melville's Temple, and this painting was inspired by a passage in Moby Dick in which a visitor to the north coast of Africa comes upon a temple that is made of the bones of all the whales who have washed ashore. The bones are taken together to build the structure. And to me, that was always an intriguing idea, just the thought of architecture made out of these massive bones. And so while the painting isn't meant to be literal, I did actually use a couple shapes of whale vertebrae that I found in the encyclopedia, and some other shapes from the bones of actual whales. But again, things are combined, and mainly this is just the idea of constructing something out of those massive bone shapes. This painting is called Tundra Skridden, and I was asked by many people at the opening the other night what that means. It's actually the name of my great-great-grandmother, Sigrid Tundra Skridden, who came from the north of Norway. And I liked her name. It sounded like she was scraped up out of the tundra. Makes me think of the myth of Ymir, who was one of the frost giants in Scandinavian mythology. He was killed by his children, and his bones were what became the structure of the earth. His blood became the rivers of the earth, and etc. So I've always thought that was kind of a creation myth. And in combination with Tundra Skridden, after the bones of Ymir formed the earth, then my ancestor was scraped up out of the earth. I pick up bones if I'm out on a trip in the wilderness, doing volunteer work, or if I'm walking in the forest and I find an interesting shape of bone, I'll just take it back to my studio. And this particular one is a combination of some of the different bone shapes that I put together as kind of a rolling landscape. I guess it relates to Tundra Skridden. And I use motifs that repeat in several of these paintings. This kind of textural motif refers to the marrow of the bone, some of the different textures that you see as the bone kind of deteriorates and it becomes more visible. Over here, I have probably the only actual landscape among this group of paintings. I usually have many landscapes, and this one is the only one here that relates to an actual place. It's called Devil's Rest, and it's a place up in the gorge where you see huge pillars of basalt. They're very mysterious and kind of ominous, these giant shapes. And all around them are softer shapes, but squarish. The lightness there.
Is that supposed to be, you don't see through, or is it like a reflection, or what?
Well, I just had kind of the idea of the light coming up out of the inside of the earth. So it's not a literal landscape, but it does have the sense of what Devil's Rest is like. Okay, this painting is called Nest, and it follows a trend from my last show 2 years ago, in which I took small objects that I found out in nature and I expanded on them. And this was a little bird's nest. It was only about 4 inches across that I found in some tall grass. And I was fascinated to see how intricately it was woven with very small grasses. And I attempted to use paint strokes of the paintbrush to follow a weaving technique myself as I worked on this. And so you can see the different colors are woven. And this also, I think, relates to the diptych, because I have those linear elements woven in different directions, creating a fabric of their own. Although my object was tiny, I wanted to expand this off of the canvas so that it just became something that spread out into the rest of the space. These pieces are called curiosities because they're little treasures that I've found when I've been out walking, and something about each one was interesting, so I picked it up and decided to paint it. And arranged here in this way, I think of this as kind of a cabinet of curiosities, such as they might have in the 19th century, where they have little scientific treasures that are assembled together. 36 small paintings here, again, relate to other work I've done where I'll be out walking and I'll pick up an object and it is very interesting. It has perhaps a spiral or it has some striped patterns, and when I take the object back to my studio, I can look at it very closely. All of these were painted directly from the object onto the panel, except for this one, this barnacle, which I found at the beach. And I took it back to the place I was staying and drew it in my sketch pad. While I was drawing it, I noticed it was still alive. So I quickly finished doing its portrait, and I took it back and threw it back into the water because it was alive. But everything else I found already not alive, such as the fly and the bees and the little pile of spiders. These were in my basement. These are very enjoyable to do on the surface of panel. The paint slides around really easily. Some are more abstract than others. In this one, for instance, you can clearly recognize the type of little shrimp that we have along the Oregon coast. And then in other cases, this is a seed pod, and I played off of its different angles, but I changed the colors somewhat.
So Carol, why do you paint? What do you get from it?
It's a sensuous, beautiful experience. I really enjoy paint. I'm sure Sandy said that too, but and the process of painting, the exploration of different materials and ideas, and it's just a wonderful thing to be able to do.